Welcome to the group visit, Restoring the Balance, Stress Hormones and Health. This topic is very important, and I want you to consider taking a look at your breath and seeing if you notice it adjust during this group visit. As we know, our breath is very much tied to how we feel. And so if we feel stressed, we'll notice our breath become shallow. And if we are feeling nice and relaxed, we'll breathe like a sleeping baby, kind of this billowy, puffy breath through our abdomen. So just take a moment to center yourself and get a sense of if you are in a relaxed state or not. And if you're not, relax a little bit more. Take some big deep breaths, because as you try to understand this information and integrate it into your knowledge base, the more relaxed you are and the more you do deep breathing, the more it'll integrate into your memory. So when we move forth and we talk about stress, the goal is to be relaxed and understand a better way to deal with it, because we know that stress, unchecked for long periods of time, can cause significant contributions to your symptoms and conditions. Now, there's a whole host of issues, and as primary care doctors see it, so many of them can be reduced or reversed if we can get proper management of that stress factor. So what is stress? We throw around the word, but the word actually, the concept of stress, didn't really come into vogue until the mid-1900s, and it's through the work of Dr. Hans Selye. So you see the definition listed here in nice medical speak: the non-specific response of the body to any demand for change. So these are a lot of different words that may or may not make sense. The first thing to understand is that it says it's a non-specific response, which means it's not the same thing that happens every single time you get stressed for all kinds of stress. And that reaction can happen whenever your body perceives a demand for change. So you might be thinking, this is still hard for me to grasp. Again, my goal is to make sure that you're not stressing during this group visit. So here's a simple definition: when your body has to respond to a demand for change, meaning whenever you feel that there is a need to change, your body has to go through some sort of stress effect. So we're going to learn how you can be very empowered by this definition. But you might be feeling a little overwhelmed, because as you look at this definition, you think, my goodness, isn't life all about change? So is it that I am doomed to be stressed all the time because I'm always going to be demanded to change for something, whether it's for my boss or for my family or my spouse, my children, my finances? They always require change. But have hope. There are solutions we're going to be talking about, because we'll recognize that there are sources of chronic stress. Chronic meaning long-term stress, but we have a unique power on how to handle them. So no matter if your stress is from your work, your family, money issues, or even stress from planning something as fun as a vacation, you can handle it so that your body doesn't feel the need to demand itself to change because of that stress. So the first thing I want to explore with you, so that you understand that there is not all just one type of stress, that stress, when we use it, we generally mean distress. Distress is something negative. So if you have a negative feeling about a situation, or let's say you didn't get a job, or that you're physically feeling bad, these are all signs of distress on the body. But equally stressful, even though we don't think about it that way, is the demand for change when something good happens. So think about getting the job. Think about the stress of the anxiety you might have about performing and doing well. And even though you're excited to get the promotion, there's still some demand for change that your body has to meet. So remember that there's those two categories. So whenever you look at a situation, you always have to wonder, how is that person perceiving the situation? So these children might be swimming in this water every single day, and it's so much a part of their existence that it really isn't a demand for change. Or it could be the first time they've ever been in the sea, and they are just giddy and completely fearing when their parents are going to ask them to leave. So remember, every situation has the capacity to be eustress, no stress, or distress based on how you decide to handle that perception. So I'm cluing you into this big power factor that you have. When we look at that definition, you'll see that it's really about demand for change, or our expectation expectation, because most of the times when we're stressing, it's some expectation or worry that we are kind of boiling around in our brain or in our mind or in our heart that then causes the physical symptoms. So you see, you have the ability to really control your world based on how you see your world. If you, as you know, see the world as the metaphorical half glass empty, well then the demand for change will increase quite a bit. But those people who have acceptance and compassion will find that they don't see the need for demand for change, that they live, they give, but they don't feel that they always will expect something. So you'll find that the number of expectations you have likely relate to the amount of stress you have. So, does this mean lower your standards? No, not at all. I want you to continue to go for the best in your life, but to have the expectation that it'll always go the way you plan, obviously you know it doesn't work out that way. So having that acceptance definitely helps reduce the stress impact on your body. So we found that the way you see your world is really how you're going to feel, and how you see your world and how you feel will determine that body's demand for change. So incorporating things like tolerance, compassion, and acceptance, all these things help reduce expectations. They help reduce suffering related to expectations that didn't pan out as you thought. So remember, let me give you an example. Let's just imagine a scenario where you're sitting on the plane. Now this happens to me very often when I'm on the plane at night. I actually love being on the plane at night, especially when I'm passing over a city and I see all those twinkling lights and I see little cars, little lights symbolizing the cars zipping up and down the highway, and I think, wow, what a wonderful world we have. And I get a very enlightened experience just understanding my place within the whole system of the universe. Now, I find it to be very grounding. I find it to be very peaceful. I find it to put things into perspective for me. And when I look over at some of the people I sit next to, I might see a young man gripping the bars next to his seat, wondering, oh my gosh, are we gonna die? You can see it in his face. His whole facial structure, his whole body, his breath pattern shows that he is in fear mode. And so he's looking at the same beautiful scenery that I'm seeing, but he sees it completely different. And because he views that very differently, he feels differently. And then the body is asked to demand for change. And that's when he decides or actually chooses to have a different response in his body. So we can choose how to perceive our stress more than we think. Let's think of another example, because really the tragic or the humorous is really a matter of perspective. I try to make a habit of having some gratitude time every single day. I wake up, and before I put my feet on the earth, I say to myself for a few minutes what I'm grateful for. This has been shown to be very good for you. So I might be grateful for my family, my husband, my kids, but sometimes I'm very grateful for something like my warm blanket, something like clean air, something like fuzzy carpet, something that might not be so huge and divine, but something that I am just happy to have in my life. And if I really flood myself with all these positive thoughts, then I decide I'm going to start the day and I'm going to be happy because look at all the things that I have to be grateful for. Then I step out of my bed, I start walking towards the bathroom and bump my toe on the wall as I turn the corner. Well, I might bump my toe, but I'll say, you know what? No big deal. I have so many things that I'm happy for, and I move on with my day. And it just kind of happens like that. Now, I'm going to paint the other scenario that was very common in my life when I looked at the world as somewhat of a threat, like just what's going to happen today and what do I have to do today? So those mornings, I would wake up, the alarm would go off, and automatically this like ticker tape would go off in my brain of all the things that I needed to accomplish, and then I would start fearing about the things I haven't done, and what do I have to do, where do I have to go, what do I need to do for the kids, and I would get into this fear state. And when I would get into this fear state, I would pop out of bed and then jump towards the bathroom and stub my toe every now and then. And when I felt that the world was going to be a bad day that day because of all the things I hadn't accomplished or the things I might not get done or do right, when I stubbed my toe, I would say, you see, I knew it was going to be a hard day. It's almost like I fed into the scenario what I was feeling. And so you really do have that power to change so many things in your life by changing your perception. Just clouding your mind with positive thoughts so that you see the world differently as opposed to flooding it with negative thoughts. So let's now talk a little bit more about the science, because we do understand that there's a connection to the way we behave to the way our body behaves. So when we dig down, we're going to look into the root causes of stress and what is happening in our body. So the first thing I want you to see is a fallacy in this statement here on the slide. It says, what's happening inside your body when you are stressed? Really, you should start getting that little notion that the question is not when you are stressed, but when you decide to react to a potential stressor. So like I said, you can look at your children, your work, and decide to make it an alarm state situation all the time, or you can use tolerance, acceptance, and compassion in order to reduce unnecessary stress when you see a potential stressor. So in our body, there is a gland called the adrenal gland. It's a 2-in-1 gland, and it's located right above our kidneys. As you see, the kidneys are those kidney bean-shaped organs, and atop them are these two golden masses. These are called the adrenals. So your adrenals have two parts, the outer shell and the inner core. The outer shell we call the cortex, and the inner core the medulla. Now each one has its own purpose. The outer shell secretes or releases two key hormones we want to talk about, cortisol and DHEA. And the inner core releases two that you might know about, norepinephrine and epinephrine. Now you might not have heard them like this, but you might have heard them as adrenaline. Remember, the base of that word is adrenal. So adrenaline, or the adrenal glands, activate when your body perceives stress. So historically, it might have been a tiger. Your body sees a tiger, your eyes see the tiger, your brain says, uh-oh, there's fear. I have fear for potential danger. I must change my situation to protect myself. And it sends a signal down to the adrenal gland, where the adrenal gland starts to release these hormones in order to set aside a different cascade that says we must survive because Susie sees a tiger. When Susie sees a tiger and we activate the adrenal system, it's about survival. When the adrenal is not overly activated from perceived stress, the adrenal has a chance to just function normally. It doesn't put out excess levels of these hormones, and it can live longer and do its functions longer for you. So remember that your body is designed to handle a certain amount of stress, but if we overwhelm the adrenal system, we have the ability to actually make it dysfunction. So let's talk about that. It's all about balance. I mean, obviously we know that we're going to have stress in our life, but the goal is not to have any unnecessary stress. So cortisol, being the stress hormone, it's actually coming out to be able to protect you. It does it because it perceives that you must need something for the danger that you're perceiving. So it increases sugar and fat because it assumes you need energy to run from that tiger. It puts you in rescue mode, and it works with that adrenaline to make sure that you can run or fight that tiger. It also tries to soothe your body in a certain way because it knows that as it kicks up a storm to fight the tiger or do what it needs to do, it has to be able to soothe you as well. It directs the immune system, and it actually directs all other hormones. It takes over because the body has decided that when your brain perceives stress, everything else needs to change to adjust to that perceived danger. Now, the opposite or the counterbalance to cortisol is DHEA. DHEA is another hormone that is released by that outer shell or cortex, and it is what helps counterbalance the cortisol. So remember, cortisol comes out whenever there's this stress. Remember, it could be good stress, bad stress, or any demand for change. And DHEA, once the cortisol comes out, helps to counter effect that. So it's the anti-stress hormone, and actually has been linked to anti-aging. So you can look at levels of DHEA, and the higher those numbers, the better. And you can think about it as they haven't been used up trying to counterbalance the cortisol, because the cortisol hasn't come out because there hasn't been tons of perceived stress. So it tends to be a calming type of hormone. Now, one bit of caution. I don't want you to look at this video and say, oh, DHEA is wonderful. Let me go to a health food store and just start taking a lot of DHEA. That doesn't work that way. We have to be sure to respect that the body has a certain balance it wants to achieve. And we all know that more of something is not always better. So you always want to make sure that you take a look at these with a qualified health professional. Now, we're talking about stress. You have to understand that there are different stages of stress. It's not like a black or white situation. So the first stage of stress, which is appropriate in certain environments, like a tiger attacking you, is the alarm stage. It is appropriate to stimulate your sympathetic system. Your sympathetic nervous system is there, which is the fight, fright, flight. We expect you to be scared if a tiger is attacking you, or if there's something that's about to harm your child. You do need to activate, run to your child's defense, and take care of them. Now, this should happen not so often, right? How often does a tiger attack you, or your child run in front of a car, or you break your leg? Not very common. So alarm stages can occur, but you have to think, check on your breathing right now, just to see if you actually are breathing. Have to think, how often do we act as though the world is going to come to an end if my computer doesn't work, or if I don't get this email in time, or if my child doesn't get a good grade, or if my child is sad about his lunch? We sometimes stress too much and we activate that alarm stage too often. Now, if we do that too much, we go into the second phase. So let's say a mother does notice in an alarm state that her child has broken his leg playing outside. So she rushes out to her child appropriately in the alarm stage. Now, the next thing that happens is that she has to take him to the doctor. And let's say the doctor says, listen, he's broken his leg, and for the next 6 weeks, you're going to have to really tend to his every need. And so the mother gets stressed, because she recognizes, wow, I have so much to do, but I have to add the caretaking of my child onto this. Well, this is where the resistance stage becomes very handy. This is where your adrenal is really on your side, trying to help you adapt to chronic stress. And so it's trying to hold everything together for you and saying, listen, I get it. He broke his leg. I see that you need a 6-week extension. I'm on it. Don't worry. But here's where things go wrong. If we don't live in a world where things are not so stressful to us, not like the past, like 200 years ago, there were basic requirements they needed. And if they got those, they let everything else go because they understood this is all I can do about my world. I accept that other things I just won't be able to change. A lot more acceptance, a lot more tolerance, a lot more compassion. So now the modern world, not so much, right? We don't just live in 6-week intervals of stress. We are constantly bombarded by things like poor sleep, noise pollution, poor food, surgery, sadness, poor social relationships, nutritional deficiencies, anger, worry. All these things, whether they're physical or emotional, bombard us and bombard our reserves in terms of demands for change. And so instead of being in the alarm stage and then being the resistance stage, we end up going to the third, more dangerous stage, which we call the exhaustion stage. And this is where the adrenals basically say, you know what, I cannot keep up. I cannot make enough hormones for what you're seeing out there. So it's a good thing gone bad. The adrenal is having a hard time coping with what you're perceiving as stress. And so it can kind of get in this quote unquote burnt out state. The pancreas does the same thing if you eat too much sugar. Over time, it has the potential to burn out, and that leads to dysfunction and then disease, which we call diabetes. So the adrenal, being a gland, has the same potential to quote unquote burn out. So let's see what happens. We can actually use salivary testing at times when it's necessary and appropriate to see what's going on with the adrenal's ability to put out cortisol. So this is a cortisol curve over the day. And you can see the first line I have is the red one. And the red one is kind of similar to what we say in the early stages of chronic stress. Your adrenal says, hey, listen, I hear that you're stressed out. I am amping up that cortisol and I'm going to get it out there for you because I get that you need it. And so you see that whole curve lifts up out of the normal range. The normal range is that green cone area that starts out wide in the beginning part of the day and narrows up. So you see the red one is higher because your adrenal is on all the time. But then what happens over time is that stage 1 was Superman. I can do it. I got the cortisol. Let's get it done. Stage 2 is, I'm getting tired of this. Sometimes cranky. So yeah, you're getting things done, but your mood, your other hormones, your physical body is starting to pay a price. And then stage 3 is down and out. Your adrenal says, I cannot keep up with your demand for change. I just don't have it in me to keep putting out the cortisol, the DHEA, the epinephrine, and norepinephrine. And now I am just tuckered out, and the line flatlines, for lack of a better word. So you can see that so much of your control has to do with your brain going down and perceiving things differently so that your adrenal has a chance to be at rest sometimes. Because we see that what happens when we activate that adrenal all the time is not just what we think in terms of burning out, but let's look at the specific things. When your brain commands your adrenal, remember, is the conductor of all these other functions in your body, and as long as your body is communicating well, it'll tell the brain, okay, this is what we've decided based on what you think. Now this is what happens when that adrenal gets activated too often. Remember we said it increases blood sugar, but it also breaks down muscle for glutamine. Glutamine is important for lining repair. So it's trying to help you with what it anticipates your needs will be in the stress state. Remember, it increases body fat just in case you need some storage, in case you can't eat for a few days. Because back then, it used to be that a stress state was starvation. So it's anticipating maybe you need that. Maybe you got cut by the tiger and you're going to be sitting around for 3 days without any food until somebody finds you. So maybe you need some excess body fat. This is one of the reasons why it's so hard for people to lose weight when they're stressed. And then it also breaks down your bone for calcium. So now let's start looking at it even more. What else happens? Well, if you keep stressing, if you keep thinking that you need change, more help is on the way. The adrenal will give you what you keep asking for. So it reduces your thyroid function. So it reduces antibody production. These are like your secret weapons of the immune system that helps you fight infections. And it reduces overall immunity, especially in your gut. Your gut is so important for your whole immune system, and that whole immune system starts to weaken. So now let's see how those changes start affecting you on ways that you might be able to understand on an outward manifestation. So for instance, if you have prolonged storage of fat because your adrenal is always on, you can see how that can cause the weight issues that we have in our country. How about the blood sugar imbalances that the adrenal causes when it's constantly activated? That could explain why diabetes and metabolic syndrome is on the rise in our country. How about the loss of muscle and the underactive thyroid? That also explains weight gain, but also explains how we're aging much quicker. We injure much earlier. We have less longevity, less good years of our life. We don't see, how we used to, where diabetes used to be a disease for seniors and cancer used to be a disease for seniors. We start seeing that we're just wearing down our body too early. We talked about the loss of bone and how that explains the earlier bone disease that we're seeing. And then we all know that when we deplete our immune system from stress, that we get sick easier. So you see how it all works back and forth, that when your body health is better, that helps your brain health and adrenal health. But if your mental health is better, that helps your adrenal health and that helps your body. So when we look at these sources of stress, they're all just potential sources of stress because you can decide how you choose to view them. And remember that there's so many things that you can do, but these are 4 key stressors that you might keep in mind. Sleeping well is very important. We talked about how you think and feel. And the immune system, we talked about there's many things that can actually flare the immune system and cause that state of fear and survival that the body, the adrenal, has to manage. And inflammation that can be related to sugar and insulin imbalances. So whether it's from your diet or from other sources, all these things can really overwork that adrenal or HPA axis. So what can you do for yourself for sleep? Sleep 7 to 9 hours a night and practice relaxation techniques to help reduce worry so you have good quality sleep. Try to write down your to-do list if you're worried that you won't remember it and you don't have good sleep, and always seek medical attention if you think that there could be a medical cause to it. Remember that food is information to your adrenal, so it's really smart to eat breakfast and not those refined foods like processed bagels and cereals and coffee and donuts. These things are not the ideal breakfast. They really work that adrenal unnecessarily. Eating a good healthy breakfast is a wonderful adrenal support mechanism. Eat more fruits and vegetables and eat less sweets and sugary drinks. How about eating protein with each meal? That helps you regulate your blood sugar and your insulin. And remember, we said that that really helps that adrenal be healthy for as long as you need it to be healthy. You want to limit caffeine and alcohol, again, because they tend to act as stimulants and can really overwork that adrenal. And last but not least, eat good fats. Things like salmon, things like fats from nuts and seeds, avocados, and try to avoid things like fried foods and those bad fats called trans fats. You can always read your labels and know if they're good for you or not. Remember that the right balance requires you to move, and it doesn't always have to be in a gym in some sort of boot camp exercise class. It could be whatever you need so that not only your body but your mind has the ability to attain that right balance. So find some sort of exercise and move 30 minutes every day. Remember, how you think and feel absolutely will determine how your adrenal will behave long term. So think about adjusting how you want to perceive your world so that you can be in that same world but just see it differently. And remember that I'm hoping that not only are you incorporating that deep breathing technique to help your adrenal and your brain not see so much stress in the world, but that you actively incorporate ways to find more peace, whether again you do it through tolerance, acceptance, or compassion as a start. You'll see that your adrenal has an ability to help serve you for longer when you really do have true needs for stress. And in the words of a very relaxed man who lived to that wonderful age of 100, George Burns, a comedian who actually didn't follow the best of lifestyles. I mean, always had a cigar, always had some liquor. You'd think that this man shouldn't have made it to 100 based on what you see, but his adrenal and DHEA must have been in his favor. And he says, if you ask what is the single most important key to longevity, I would have to say it is avoiding worry, stress, and tension. And if you didn't ask me, I'd still have to say it. So he understood that a big part of his health was just having a different perspective. So I hope that you have the ability to look at your life, make those stressors turn into potential stressors and then no stressors, because you have a different way of looking at the world. Look at the way that you sleep, move, and manage your stress, and a way to help yourself with your conditioner symptom. Take care and be well always.